Welcome to this episode of Sunny's Silver Linings. Sunny's guest today is Peter Kujawa, Vice President of Service Leadership at ConnectWise. In today's episode, they chat about MSP community performance, preparing for a recession, margins MSPs should be targeting, and so much more. And now, your host, the founder and CEO of IT by Design, Mr. Sunny Kaila. Over to you, Sunny.
Hi, Peter. Welcome to the show.
Morning, Sunny. How are you today?
We collect a lot of data, and based on that data, how is the MSP community doing? And let's serve them by sharing what you know, your understanding from benchmarking and data that you collect.
Yeah, it's a great question. We get the question all the time, especially with the economy at a macro level, the way it is. And what I can say is that the last 2 years have been extraordinarily good ones for the MSP community. The data, we benchmark MSPs worldwide every quarter, and we have the largest benchmarking set for the industry, as you know. And what our data has shown us over the past 2 years is really extraordinary performance. If you would have asked me sitting in March of 2020, right when COVID hit, as we were sitting with our leadership team looking around the room at each other, wondering, are we going to have a business in 6 months, or are any of our customers going to be in business in 6 months? How's this going to end for anybody? I think there were thousands of those meetings going on with MSPs all over the country, all over the world at the time. And if you would have asked me, I would have never predicted that 2020, 2021, and first half of 2022 would be as great as they've been. Obviously, there was a big drop in Q2 of 2020 when the lockdowns first hit, but the industry came back, and there's been really nice steady growth, nice steady profitability. There's been 2 record years, 2020 and 2021, for profitability for the best in class, which is our top quartile of financial performers. The median performers had 2 record years, and even the bottom quartile, who are all losing money, unfortunately, they're losing less money in the past 2 years than they have been prior to that. So overall, it's been a really high tide, and for the industry, it's been a great couple of years. That being said, the top quartile is on average making about 25% EBITDA. The cutoff to get into the top quartile is just over 18%. Q2 of 2022, the bottom quartile, what cutoff to get into that was negative 3.2%, with an average loss of negative 10%. So as you know, as somebody who owns and has run a number of businesses over the years, you don't want to be running a business that is sitting where you're in that bottom quartile, where you're losing money and losing quite a bit of money. So while the industry in general is doing really well, about a third of the MSP community is right now losing money, which means that there's another big chunk that's barely getting by. As I like to say, they're flying their plane right at the top of the trees. So any downdraft in the economy could pull them right into the trees. So there's definitely a chunk of the industry that needs to improve.
Yeah, and I remember you mentioned this during Build It as well. And there's some MSPs, they don't even know their numbers, right? So the numbers that you're talking about is people from people that you're collecting data from, but there is a percentage of people where they don't have clarity with their numbers, and they don't know if they're making money or losing money as well.
Yeah, it's something we definitely see a lot of. Our industry is interesting. 60% of the industry today, in our annual report, we went back and compared to 2014 to see, are there still a lot of smaller MSPs out there? That our industry historically has had a lot of small companies, but with all the consolidation, is that still the case? And what we found was that under 3 million, there's still about 60% of the industry. 2014, that was about 70% of the industry, but what that means is you have a lot of companies out there that have less than $1 million a year of revenue, and don't have sophisticated accounting departments and don't maybe have sophisticated finance people, typically the MSP community, MSPs are started by technologists. They're started by really smart engineers who are entrepreneurial and decide to work for themselves and pick up a client or two, and they add a few more smart folks, technical folks, and they add a few more clients, and they get to a point where they're 6, 8, 10 employees, and they need to bring in some more sophisticated business people in some cases. Those smaller MSPs, especially when we talk to them, but even some larger ones, they tend to confuse revenue growth with profitability growth oftentimes.
Yeah.
So they're excited because they've been bringing on a lot of new clients and their top line's been growing and their monthly recurring revenue's been growing, but they're not necessarily pricing their offerings right or packaging them right. So they're not bringing in enough gross margin to cover their sales and G&A costs. And so, yeah, they're growing. That's the good news. The bad news is if you're losing money on bottom line, growth is not necessarily a positive. You've got to really fix the foundation of your business so that you can profitably grow your business in a sustainable way. But we see that a lot in the MSP community. Yeah.
And I think there's a saying, Peter, that revenue is a vanity and profits are sanity.
Yeah, I love it. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move on to, you did mention recession or potential recession. So is the managed services industry in a recession, and what should MSPs do to prepare for a potential recession?
Yeah, it's a question we're getting a lot these days. It's the number one question I get when I go out to present or speak to groups. So you mentioned Evolve. We go every quarter to the Evolve meetings and meet in person with hundreds of MSPs, and but we have a lot of interaction at other events as well. And by far, the number one question I get is, "Are we in a recession? And what do we need to be doing? What should we be doing right now to get ready for it?" Definitely, it's an important topic. I'll be speaking again on this subject coming up in more detail. But in short, what I would be doing if I'm running an MSP right now is, number one, make sure that your profitability is where it needs to be. If you're an MSP who right now is unprofitable, well, these are great times. If you're not profitable today, what's going to happen when if the economy goes down and some of your customers go out of business or they shrink the size of their business and therefore shrink the number of users that you're supporting, which will shrink their contracts? If you're not making money today, when are you going to make money? Right? These are great. The last couple of years have been great times for the industry. So I would be taking a very hard look at your profitability first and foremost, and making some difficult decisions. If you have some positions that need to be eliminated, if you have some underpriced customers, if you have things that you've avoided doing as a business because they're difficult to do or uncomfortable to do, don't wait. You need to do those things today, because there's a lag before they take effect. If you eliminate a position today, for example, it's not going to instantly impact your profitability. It's going to take a period of weeks, maybe a period of months if there's severance, for that to impact your profitability. If you increase a contract today in price, it's not going to impact your profitability this month. It'll impact it some next month and future months. But if you wait, it's never going to help you. So take action today if you're not where you need to be profitability wise. And if you're not sure where you are profitability wise relative to the industry, get a hold of us and you should start benchmarking, so that every quarter you know exactly how you're doing and you have the information at your fingertips to make those kind of decisions. But number one, fix your profit engine. Make sure that your business, no matter how fast you're growing, make sure that you're first and foremost profitable. So that's number one. Number two is really focus on your balance sheet and focus on your cash. Cash buys time. So if if we hit a rough patch in the economy at a macro level, and you need to make other changes in your business to adjust, the more cash you have on your balance sheet, the more time that you're able to buy. And so, because those changes in the business are going to be ones that take time to impact your business. And so you don't want to avoid making difficult decisions because you've got a pile of cash you can tap into. You want to keep that cash as long as you can, but at least having that cash there will buy you time. So how do you build up your cash reserve? Well, you focus on your accounts receivable, make sure that you're collecting from your customers quickly and you're getting paid. You maybe do more leasing so that you can improve your cash flow that way and not have an outlay in cash for customers. But make sure you're really focusing on building up that cash reserve.
Absolutely. No, thank you. I mean, that's those are great insights and great advice. Because if you don't have your cash position, then it's hard to really get through tough times, right? So that emergency fund or whatever you want to kind of really have there, but it's mainly. So what I heard you say is that focus on fixing your profit engine first, fixing, focusing on your balance sheet, and focus on your cash because cash buys time. So thank you for sharing that. Now that's it. My next question is there any trend that you see, Peter, with MSPs using a master MSP versus doing everything in-house? Why I asked this question is, when we were having conversations around Build It, and there was some data that you were referring to where, like, because in-house, right, the main cost is talent for MSPs, tech talent, and talent cost has been going up. Cybersecurity talent has been going probably 200x. So the cost of doing business with talent and tools has been going up. And when you have that talent in-house and dealing with the churn, there was a lot of churn, great resignation period as well. So a lot of things impacted MSP's staffing cost. So can you talk to us a little bit more about your data that you have and insights that you have gained from that data in terms of what MSPs should do to make sure that their staffing side, their labor cost side is under control while they are considering other options that you are talking about here in terms of the pricing and other things that you're talking about, because the major driver to profit is service GP. So when you talk about service GP and the cost and the labor, how do you see things in the MSP industry, especially with the master MSP in-house or just in general staffing reference?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of things baked into that question, Sonny. So I'll try to peel it apart a little bit. The first one is you're definitely right. You use GP, we use gross margin, same thing. There's really three drivers of gross margin. If you're an MSP, about 60% of your revenue is going to be coming from managed services. And so your most important margin is going to be your services gross margin. So how do you influence services gross margin on managed services? Really, there's only three levers that you can pull. Number one is your pricing. And so we can get into that in more detail if you'd like. But number one is your pricing. Number two is your tools cost. So your cost of goods sold for delivering managed services is based on the tools. And number three is your technical team cost. And what does it cost you in terms of payroll and benefits and all of your all-in cost to actually provide the labor to do the work? So that's it. I mean, if you want to improve gross margin, those are your three things you can focus on. And the two biggest in those are going to be your labor cost on your COGS and your pricing. Your tool cost is typically going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 20% of your cost to deliver. About 70 to 80% of your cost is going to be your labor cost. So really, really critical to understand what you're really spending in terms of labor to deliver your services, and building your engine to be as efficient as possible there to be able to not only give great quality, but do it at a price that you can make a profit. What we've seen is a positive correlation between outsourcing some or much of your support and the profitability of the MSP. It used to be, I think, in the industry, kind of a sign of weakness or failure or whatever that if you outsourced anything. But today, we're seeing, even with larger MSPs, outsourcing. Some are outsourcing help desk functionality. Some are outsourcing. A lot of MSPs today are outsourcing NOC. And a lot of MSPs, I would bet the majority of MSPs are outsourcing their SOC. And for the reasons that you outlined, it's just difficult to find qualified people. The cost to deliver those, to staff those, is untenable. There's a whole 24/7 aspect of staffing that comes in, and the cost to deliver those services. So there's a lot of reasons to do it, but today we definitely are seeing a majority of MSPs that are outsourcing some of their support. Again, it may be a narrow band of NOC or SOC, or it may be a more comprehensive total help desk and NOC and SOC, and they're delivering the on-site and the project engineering more. But it's definitely a strategy that's being employed by a lot of very smart MSPs.
So what I heard you say is that in order for MSPs to make money, they got to be hyper focused on three things. First of all, gross margins, service profitability. And service profitability will come from their overall pricing, their tool cost, and their technical team cost. And if they want to be profitable as a business, these are the three things they need to really pay attention to, understand the challenges, and having strategy to overcome this challenge. And I want to talk numbers a little bit. So, and I used to benchmark numbers as well as MSP, get SLI report every quarter and discuss that with my group at Evolve. And first thing that we always looked at, and I don't expect you to remember these numbers, I'm just I'm curious what you're seeing in the industry, whatever you remember from these 2-3 things. One is the hardware software. That used to be the first one. Mainly what we were looking there was, what is the markup? Like, is that the hardware software that we sell, like laptops, hardware, like server, desktops? And it used to be in that range of about 20% was a number that at least as MSP we were targeting. Is that what you're seeing there in terms of best-in-class benchmark?
No, it's gone up. So product for us includes hardware, software, cloud, anything that is product. And best-in-class is around 26%. So it's definitely continued to improve. We've continued to see that go up. Now, some inputs to that are going to be higher, and some are going to be under that 26. But definitely the notion that MSPs can't make any money on product is a false one. That if you're pricing your products correctly, not only can you make gross margin on those products, but that gross margin is essential to your profitability as a business.
Yes. And yeah, so 26%. And meanwhile, Paul Dipple used to come to our group lunch sessions as well. And then, so yes, you can make money with hardware, software. But one thing that he will always talk about in our group is, like, from the value building point of view, this is important. So don't give up on this. But at the same time, you don't want to have a very high percentage of your revenue coming from hardware, software, right? That probably holds still true.
Well, it depends on your business model. So we also benchmark what we call product-centric service providers, and those are providers who have 60% or more of their revenue coming from product. And so that's the classic VAR. And so the VAR business model, the VARs are all trying to get more into services, not because they're inherently unprofitable. In fact, the VARs today, their percentage of profitability is lower, but they're much larger revenue numbers. So the bottom line in terms of actual dollars is pretty good. Again, there's the bottom quartile there is losing money as well, but the top quartile are doing really well. So that business model is fine. But what's interesting that we saw the pattern on this year as we were analyzing the data for our annual report is that VARs are all trying to become more like MSPs. They're trying to build a recurring revenue managed service business within their VARs and transition to being more like MSPs. What's interesting is in the last couple of years with the growth of cloud and especially 365 revenue, what we're seeing is that MSPs they're getting a lot more of their revenue from product. And so it's almost like, and a lot of MSPs we talk to are really excited about this revenue. They look at the cloud revenue that they're getting, it's recurring revenue, but it's not managed services. The margins on it are not in your control as an MSP. And so essentially what we saw when we analyzed the data in our annual report is that while all the VARs are trying to become more like MSPs, in the last couple of years, the MSPs are trying to become more like VARs, right? Because they're all getting excited about this recurring revenue from cloud services. And our advice to MSPs is don't get super excited about that revenue because you don't control the margin. What Microsoft gives, Microsoft can take away, right? And any other provider as well. Not to single out Microsoft, but any other provider, they ultimately control that margin. So our advice to MSPs is to make sure that they're adding services on top of that revenue. And so that whether it be administrative fees or whether it be other aspects of service delivery, that they're building that into their managed service package and they're sufficiently providing enough gross margin to really cover their cost of delivering those services, so that regardless of what any of the cloud providers do with the margin, they're still profitable on it. And so when we talk to MSPs and survey them about that, about half of the MSPs we talk to are doing that today. A lot of the best-in-class folks are doing exactly that. About half are not, and they're strictly selling the licensing at retail, and that's where they're capturing their margin. Yeah. And so if you're one of those MSPs, I would advise that you put some services layer on top of that.
Yeah. So what I hear you say is that it's a good strategy that is, it kind of really adds to your overall profitability. And, another thing that I see it does is it gives you, so it's not giving opportunity to any other like VAR who can just come in and replace you with other services, right? So you are more sticky with the customer if you have your customer is coming to you for hardware, software as well. And I do agree with the point where I just went to 501 awards ceremony, and they had like a 2 days MSP summit. But then prior to that, there was 2-day summit for like more VARs or telecom companies, copier companies. Yep. A lot of
I spoke at that event.
Oh, you were there as well.
Yep.
So I see conversations that I was having with companies where their traditional business is something related to copiers or telecom or other things. They're more getting into managed services as well. So you want to probably be sticky with your customers and not have someone, like who just comes in and replace you with other services. But I do want to move on to the second line item. There used to be more of like Office 365 to Datto type of billing them based on we're calling them like resold services that you buy. You don't have to have labor, like direct labor cost to deliver on that dollar. You're just buying some kind of subscription and you are kind of charging markup on that subscription, and it's not even a transaction, it's more like a recurring, not like hardware software where it's a
Correct.
transaction based, but here it's like a recurring revenue, but it just comes from you buying some cloud services and selling. What is the margin that, what's your advice there for MSPs? What kind of margin that they should make there?
It's the same advice. So we count that as product. It's recurring revenue, but it's not managed services. A lot of MSPs mix the two up and look at both as the same, and it's not the same. Your margin is not in your control. It's in the control of the company that you're reselling to a great degree. So this is where we advise them to, it goes into your product. And so again, your blended product gross margin right now, best in class, is about just above 26%. So on some of these products, it's going to be under that. On some of them, it's going to be over that. But on a blended basis, you're going to come in about 26% best in class. But what they should also be doing is adding a services layer on top of that subscription, and that should go into their managed services revenue. So they should be looking at what additional services do they really provide. And because they do, there's a cost to provide all of these subscriptions. So whether it be the administrative cost to handle the subscriptions for new employees coming into the business, to do the billing, et cetera, and make it easy for the customer. There's a back office cost there. There's a technical cost there. So they should really be building additional revenue into their managed service agreements on top of whatever they're charging and passing through to Data or Microsoft in the examples that you used. And so that revenue goes into the managed services bucket, and the cost to deliver those services goes into the managed service COGS.
Yeah. And now let's talk about managed services, which is the core business of MSPs. What is the margin that you're seeing there? Or what's your advice to MSPs, what they should target for best in class?
Yeah, the best in class is right around 51% on managed services, and bottom quartile is right around 39%, 38.8% to be specific. And so that doesn't sound like a huge difference, but it's a huge difference. And so, and why is that such a huge difference? Well, an MSP on average in general is going to have about 30% cost using for their sales and their G&A expense. And so when you're looking at your pricing on your services, it's really critical to be out shooting that 30%, because that cost is going to be hitting you, and a lot of providers forget about it. We talk to a lot of MSPs who say, yeah, I just got this new contract and it's great, and I'm going to be at 25% margin or 28% margin. Well, you're losing money on that contract because you still have sales cost and you still have your G&A, your overhead for your business. And so if you're not above 30% on average, you're going to be losing money. So best in class, like we said, is about 51% on their managed services.
Okay, so 51%. And then, okay, so in terms of MSPs using Master MSP or not using MSP, do you have any understanding there that what MSPs, so best in class are making 51%, and if the same best in class is using rather than in-house, they are outsourcing to an external party, could be, ConnectWise provide NOC service, we provide NOC service as Master MSP. So is there any difference that it makes in terms of percentages?
Yeah, in general, when we've looked at it, we've seen a positive correlation. So those who are outsourcing some or all of their service, there's a positive impact on that in general. So so it depends. I mean, it depends on what you're selling and what you're outsourcing, but overall, we've seen a positive correlation there when we've looked at it. So those costs, that if you are outsourcing, the cost of knock or the cost of help desk or the cost of a SOC service, those costs go into your COGS for your managed services. So just like if you had those people in-house, you would put that cost in your cost of labor. If you're outsourcing it, that cost also goes into your cost of labor. But in general, like we said, when we've looked at it, we've seen good correlation between MSPs that do outsource some or all of those services and their profitability.
Awesome. Now, and G&A, I heard is about 30%. Is that what best in class are doing?
It's a little under that for best in class, and that's SG&A. So that would include your sales and marketing expenses, and it would include your general and administrative. So your rent and your cost of your finance people and your HR and all of those additional back office costs.
Yeah, can you break it down for me? The way I look at this, when I'm just thinking P&L line items, and so there's a sales marketing cost, which is to win new business, right? Upsell, cross-sell, new logos. And then you have account management. Some people kind of capture it under the same sales team. Some people have it under service delivery. So I want to have a little bit more clarity on what's your understanding of what best in class are doing in terms of their percentage spent on sales marketing, and then account management, and then rest of G&A, which is finance, HR, office space, everything else.
Yeah, I can tell you, first of all, where they should be allocating those account managers. So account managers or VCIOs, whatever you want to label them, that cost should be in your service cost, and it should be underneath your service organization. So those folks should be tied in with your service delivery. And so we put those people into cost of goods sold in managed services labor cost. So they go right in there with your help desk people and your service manager and whoever you have that's part of delivering services to the customer. Sales expense, those are the folks that are out there hunting new logos, as you said. So if you have a hybrid team, a percentage of those people should be allocated to your sales expense. If you have pure hunters, which, by the way, the best in class have a larger percentage of their sales teams in pure hunters these days. We've got some interesting data on that. That expense goes into your sales expense. We ran some data and again in our annual report this year, and we looked at what is the real cost to acquire a new logo. When you go out and you bring in a new managed service client, what are you really spending on it? And the data was really amazing. What we saw was that the cost to acquire a new logo, when we looked at bottom quartile, best in class, and median, range from $25,000 to $32,000 per logo acquired. And that cost factors in the cost of your salesperson, any commissions that are paid on those, etc. Your cost to your marketing. If you outsource marketing, what are you paying to a marketing firm? And then you add in all of your marketing related expenditures, any event cost, your website, any outbound campaigns that you do. So what's clear is that there's no easy way that anybody's figured out to go bring in new customers in our industry. It costs a lot of money. It costs a lot of money in people. It costs a lot of money, pre-sales work, etc. And so it's really, really important that you're bringing on the right customers at the right gross margin to be able to capture that. What we found was that when you looked at gross margin of bottom quartile versus gross margin of top quartile, that the bottom quartile are selling smaller deals and they're selling them at lower gross margin. Top quartile are selling larger deals, and not necessarily to bigger customers, a little bit maybe, but more so they're building more into their package. Their quote unquote gold package, it just includes more stuff, and they know their margins. They've priced these at much higher gross margin. So as a result, if you look at 3 years of gross margin, so assume that you got a 3-year contract, let's say, the bottom quartile, 89% of the 3-year gross margin is going to be used up with sales cost. The cost to acquire that customer is going to eat up 89% of the margin. Well, they still have to pay rent. They still have to pay all of their other G&A costs on those customers. So even at top quartile, it eats up about 44% of gross margin. So, I mean, there's the difference in profitability, right? Either way, it costs the top quartile a lot of money to bring on a new customer. It costs the bottom quartile a lot of money to bring on a new customer. It's just the customers they're bringing on are different. There's a much higher quality of customer that the top quartile is bringing on with that money.
Yeah. So what I heard you say is that acquiring a new logo it consumes about 44% there. So can you share that math again? Like in terms
Sure.
of like sales, marketing, percentage to revenue, like what percentage should be spent under sales and marketing as a best practice, as in reference to the top line?
The cost to acquire a fully managed client, a new logo that's on your fully managed service offering, the cost to acquire ranges from about $25,000 to about $32,000. And so that number includes your sales and marketing expenses, so your sales labor, your commissions, if there's a lead cost, if you're doing any campaigns, your marketing spend, your marketing people, all of that factored in. If you really put all of that into the bucket correctly and divide it back out, it's somewhere around $25,000 to $32,000 to bring on a client. If you look at the value of those clients, and then you look at the gross margin, and again, bottom quartile is about 38% gross margin, top quartile is about 51% gross margin. If you look at the dollar value of those contracts, and then you factor in the gross margin,
yeah,
and you look at it on a 3-year basis, the bottom quartile companies will use up 89% of the gross margin on sales expense. The top quartile folks who are doing much better will use up 44% of it on the sales expense to acquire that contract. So they've just got a lot more money left to pay their other overhead, to pay their rent, their HR people, their finance people, and then have money left to go to the bottom line, right? I mean, that's where profitability comes from. The bottom quartile, they hardly have anything left to pay their overhead once they've brought on those customers. And that assumes they're keeping them for 3 years. A lot of bottom quartile folks are really struggling to retain customers because part of the problem with being unprofitable as an MSP and being in the bottom quartile is it's a vicious circle. You're losing money, so you don't have money to staff, you don't have money to spend on the right tools to automate, to deliver better results from your clients. So you have a much higher attrition rate. You're losing clients because the quality experience is bad. And so bottom quartile is just a bad place to be. And it's really important that those providers make the decisions they need to get out of it. When I get my quarterly results, it has over 60 KPIs that it's showing you what the best in class is doing as a percentage, and then it shows you what you're doing as a percentage. So so our clients are able to get that data every quarter.
Yeah, and it's a great report for people where they haven't seen this. It just, it goes into detail, trending, it just really gives you a lot of insights that can help you as a business owner make some decisions, take some action. And it's really a great report. Okay, now, thank you for clarifying account management piece, because there's a lot of discussion overall. It used to be in the groups as well. Where should we book account management team? Is it a part of sales or it's part of service? And what I heard you say is that like VCIO or any kind of account managers where they're more like a relationship with the customers, like they are our sensors with the customer, like understanding customer experience, and also being those advisors, making sure that the delivery and the account management team work together to deliver on that experience. Now, when it comes to like pre-sales work, you mentioned that. What do you see in the industry? Like, where are people booking that cost pre-sales? Is it part of service or is it part of sales?
It should be part of service. Your sales engineers, your pre-sales engineers, they should be part of your service organization. And there's a few reasons for that. One is they're technical people. Oftentimes in smaller MSPs, they're folks who are also supporting clients on a day-to-day basis. But even as you get into larger MSPs, part of the reason it's important for them to be part of the service organization is the service organization is going to be who has to deliver those results to the client. So you want to make sure that you have somebody who's integrated into the service organization to be able to make sure that the solutions that are being developed in pre-sales engineering are ones that are going to be able to be delivered at a high quality level by the service team. And so the best way to deliver that is to have those people as part of that team and be in alignment with that team. So that both that cost and the reporting should be part of the services organization.
Yeah, and that probably also helps as like more of a integrated team side as well. Like collaboration is better because they're part of one division.
You bet. Yep.
Yeah. Now, in terms of service salaries, right? It used to be in that 33%, 40, somewhere between 33 to 40% range, like engineers' service salaries as a percentage to revenue. Is that still staying in that range if you remember that data point?
Well, it's about, as we look at gross margin calculations, so for every dollar of managed service revenue, about 70 to 80% of it's going to be eaten up by your cost of your technical team. So looking at on a blended average, I'd have to look at it, Sonny, but just on the managed services piece, most of your cost to deliver those services is going to be based on your salaries and wages. So about 70 to 80% of your COGS. So if you're running based on that math, if you're running best in class, that would be right in line, about 35 to 40% of your total revenue. But again, depends on what you've priced your revenue or your services at, or have you priced them at a level to deliver sufficient gross margin or not. There's a lot of variables that would affect that.
Yeah, and you already mentioned, so the last and the most important item is EBITDA normally, and that's what a lot of MSPs with so much M&A going on and everything. Now people are a lot more aware about EBITDA. When Paul Dipple used to come like 7-8 years ago to my group, and he will start talking about EBITDA, I'm like, what is that? And again, technical background, right? So, but like it was more net operating income and some other terminology I knew, but he started talking a lot more about EBITDA. So what you mentioned, 18 to 25% is the range, 25% being best in class MSPs in terms of their EBITDA.
Actually, the cutoff to get into best in class is just over 18%.
Yeah.
The average of the best in class is about 25%.
Wow.
So if you make that cut to get into best in class, to make the cut, you've got to be at 18.4% as of Q2, but the average is right around 25%. So in other words, you've got some MSPs out there who are doing 28, 30%, 32%, and delivering really unbelievable results. And they're doing it quarter in and quarter out. So they're just really well-run MSPs. Yeah.
So can you elaborate on this a little bit? Because, if you remember from our conference, Peter, there was the author of Profit First book. He said,
yes.
Okay, take your top line minus your profit, and then the rest of the dollars that you have is that you have to live with those dollars in terms of your expenses. So rather than looking at the P&L from your top line, then looking at your service margins, then looking at your sales, marketing cost and G&A cost, and then your profit, take the profit first. So where I had questions is, like, he will, in his book, talk about, let's say, he gives a lot of examples around 10%. So am I hearing you right? If, the way you kind of take this EBITDA approach, 25%, let's say, is, my target is 25%. I want to be 25% EBITDA MSP. So now, do I take my revenue minus 25%, and then 75% is where I want to spend? I mean, that's my expense budget. What percentage I want to spend under service or sales or G&A is mine, but I take 25% out of top line?
Yeah, what I would suggest an MSP do who's trying to drive their profitability is start with your services gross margin. So first look at, if you know that best-in-class service gross margin is 51%, I really liked his message, because we preach the same thing when you're looking at how to get to your service gross margin. What I mean is, look at what your revenue is, and you want to optimize your revenue. You need to make sure you're pricing your product sufficiently. You need to make sure you're doing annual increases at a high enough level. You need to make sure that you're doing all of these things to maximize your revenue. So first, figure that out. Second thing is, look at what your cost of your tools are, and your cost of your tools, generally speaking, are going to be your cost of your tools. You're going to not be able to say, let's get rid of half of our tools, assuming you've made the right buying decisions on what you've invested in. So subtract that from your revenue, and that leaves you a certain amount at 51% gross margin. So that dollar amount that's left over is the amount that you have for salaries and wages. So figure out, first and foremost, how much do I have based on this to pay for my technical team? As you mentioned earlier, most of the providers look at it the opposite. They start off saying, what am I going to pay for my technical team, and what's left after that? And so you should go at it the opposite way if you're really trying to figure out how to drive 51% gross margin. Start with, you've got a budgeted amount. This is how much we're going to have. If we want to have more